Introducing NASM-1, NASM's ultimate membership program, where the NASM community helps each other build incredible careers, transforming the lives of the clients we inspire and supporting each other as we grow and succeed. NASM-1 is best-in-class tools, cutting-edge certifications, confidence in your craft, and everything you do as a personal trainer made easy.
You're listening to the NASM-CPT Podcast with Richey, winner of the Sharecare Emmy Award for Social Storytelling and the official podcast of the National Academy of Sports Medicine.
Hey y'all, and welcome to the NASM-CPT Podcast. My name is Richey, and today I'm going to be talking with somebody that I have met throughout the years many times, usually at conferences. So particularly Idea World. It's a big conference you guys are quite familiar with if you listen to the podcast. And every year, like, you kind of see some faces recurring. Like, I might be an instructor that people gravitate to for whatever reason, and there are other instructors and presenters and things like that people gravitate to. But fortunately, I have a chance throughout the years to meet this gentleman who's going to be on the show today, and we just started catching up at the last conference, and I found out that he is about to graduate, or just graduated, at the time was about to graduate, from my alma mater. So let's just go into it. He's got a BS in kinesiology with a minor in gerontology, master's in exercise science, and his doctorate in health science from, well, I usually say California University of Pennsylvania, but now it's called Penn West, as it is merged with some other universities in the area. He's currently lead faculty for the exercise science career education program at Moore Park College, where he teaches health education, kinesiology, and preps people for NASM, ACE, AFA, in collaboration with the fitness employees that connect business and qualified fitness professionals. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show, Jeff Kreil. Hi, Jeff. How are you?
How are you, Rick? Thanks for having me.
Thanks, man. I'm good. I'm living the dream, man. I appreciate it. And it's always good to see you at those conferences. But I feel like when I found out you were about to go through and wrap up this program that I did, I was like, oh, you're in the heat of it now. This is the last stretch. And then I found out your stretch was really not quite as hard as mine.
We'll just go call it a different stretch.
It's a different stretch. You know, there are some stretches that are really intense, and there are some stretches that are mild and gentle. And tell everybody what we're talking about.
So just to give you a little heads up at home. So Dr. Richey actually completed the Doctor of Health Science program in completing his dissertation. So a particular research project that he had to conduct and go through the extensive process of going through that. Whereas I chose a different path. I realized that the dissertation wasn't required for my doctorate for what I was pursuing. And so therefore I chose what's termed the portfolio path, which really is a culmination, I should say, of 9 different artifacts that I need to create, including scholarship, research. I did have to do research, so I did some of that, of course.
Okay.
Teaching
I'm teasing.
teaching artifacts, and then, of course, leadership or artifacts where I do community-based work. So similar, not the same, and there's definitely a little wink that goes to your because it's definitely different, and I get it. Trust me, I get it.
Listen, I'm going to tease you until the end, my friend. Not at the end of the podcast, but the end of me knowing you. And the reason is, like, obviously dissertation's hard, and I'm not taking anything away from the project that you did. I just like to tease you. With that being said, one of the things that you studied in your project, so as you came to the end and you're starting to really develop and focus. You had been working with youth, and I think that you do some strength and conditioning coaches for some local youth, maybe high schools in the area. So tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, where you live, and some things we need to know about you as we start to get into what your course of study was, which was youth with ADHD.
Yeah, thanks. Well, a little bit about me. So I'm married with 3 boys, and I live in Irvine, California, which is in Southern California in Orange County. And I am a lead faculty, as you mentioned, of Moore Park College, and I specifically focus on kinesiology, health education. And in addition to that, I am also a certified strength coach. I have my NASM-CES, PES. I'm a group fitness instructor, as well as, of course, a certified personal trainer. And strength and conditioning was always something really exciting for me. I always liked sports, and I was an athlete growing up. And of course, once that kind of passed me by on the competitive level, I want to still use my passion for exercise and lifting weights to be able to help others in improving performance. Well, it was always interesting to me because once I had my first son, who is now almost 17, I really loved helping them in recreation coaching, things of that sort. But I also realized that when I was started off as an assistant, there was really no movement planning. There was no intent to help people move better. And then also I found that a lot of the practices were very linear. We work on X, then we work on Y, then we work on Z. And there's really nothing like where we kind of add some variability. And really my whole thing is, if I can help an athlete become smarter, help them become better at problem solving, work more on the cognitive side, then I can get the best of both worlds. I can create a better movement, a movement musician, if you will, as well as, of course, a person who's going to understand how these movements apply to their sport. And that really launched into my love for working with youth. And I'm talking from kindergarten up to college. And I still work with clients now, very part-time, definitely just to keep my skills sharp. And then, as you mentioned, I was hired as a strength coach, very part-time, again, more of like a volunteer thing, really, with Irvine High School, which is right down the street from me. And I work with the water polo program, boys and girls. And it's really interesting because these are student athletes, and we have people with different backgrounds of exercise, sports experience, and even just being in a weight room type of experience. So applying my love for that to the young folks, to me, is exciting. And I like seeing the changes, not just the physical ones, but also the cognitive ones that happen with that.
I want to dig into the education a little bit, man, because you, was there a break? So you did your 4-year degree, and then you did a master's, and then you went into your doctorate. Did you have any breaks in between there, or did you just go all the way through?
Yeah, so the gray hair should tell you that I took some breaks. I actually finished my undergrad a couple years before I got married, before I even met my wife. And then I took time off. It was my time to go and work. I actually used to be a corporate fitness educator for 24-Hour Fitness, traveling all over the country, teaching certification classes, recertification classes, continuing education, really kind of understanding the business more, and realizing that, interestingly, I didn't know that I wanted to do fitness as a career. That was not even on my radar. It was really strength conditioning. I wanted to work at a university working with athletes primarily. And then we were then pregnant with my oldest son. And then I finished my master's through, at that time was Cyle of Pennsylvania, finished my master's in exercise science. So that was it was about 8 years before I had done that. And then after that, again, same thing. I'm teaching at the college. I'm working full time. I'm running my own gym. I have my own gym out in North Corona, where I worked with soccer players, baseball players, actually some professional volleyball players now, they're pros. And so then, but still teaching at the college. And then I decided, you know what, I think it's time for me to go ahead and sort of upgrade my knowledge, upgrade my ability to help my students. And that's when I decided just 2 years ago to go ahead and pursue the Doctor of Health program, Doctor of Health Science program. So there are definitely some breaks in between. And I found that to be incredibly valuable because I was able to bring real world experience into my assignments, into the peer interactions. And I thought that was actually a pretty useful thing.
I agree with that. After every time I finished school, it was the last time I'd go to school. And that was my 4-year degree. That then was my master's. Then I went back to school to massage therapy. And I can tell you for a fact, I was like, I have zero desire to go anywhere beyond where I did. And of course, when I told my wife, I was like, hey, I think I want to look at this program for my doctorate. She was like, here we go again. Right. So, but yeah, there was time in between. And I think that the time in between did me well to prepare and work and focus on training, focus on my business, focus on what I do and develop as a professional before I really got into the work that I was doing as academic. And that's helpful for me, because I feel like a lot of times there are professors out there that are steeped in academia, and they used to maybe lift and focus on lifting 20 years ago when they were in college, 30 years ago, and they just haven't done it. And so they're not in the middle of it. They are not, if they're not doing research and they're not staying active and they're not doing the lifting themselves, then I feel like they lose a step. And you can still look at the research, but I think it's vital to be able to take that research and the application to better understand how people are applying concepts. And honestly, the stuff that hasn't been researched yet. There are so many different types of training protocols that are out there that is just waiting to bubble to the surface for researchers to look at and go, let's test that one. Let's test that one. Now, with that being said, what is you did your focus on youth with ADHD, and I think this is important because not too long ago, not too recently, I had a gentleman on the show by the name of Peter Shankman. And Peter Shankman's got a podcast called Faster Than Normal. He's got a book called Faster Than Normal, and it's all about people with the ADHD brain. And if you follow Peter, if you watched any of his stuff, listen to any of his talks, and he's a keynote speaker all across the world, and a delightful guy, but I always said that I listen to my podcast generally on 2 times speed, and I'd have to put it on half speed just to understand what he was saying. So there are people that are faster than normal. And what I love about what he teaches and talks about and focuses on is that it's not necessarily, well, first of all, for him, it's not a bad thing at all with him and many people in very, very successful executive positions. They have neurodivergent brains. And on his podcast, he has those people come onto his show, people with neurodivergence, whether it's ADHD or many of the other things that people have that are generally of concern when you're young and your parents are very concerned about it on your behalf, that end up working out in your favor if you can learn to harness it and ride it in the right direction. Now, with that being said, there is a correlation with physical activity, and that is something that you started to look at and you started to study. So I'm curious why that was something you started to dig into, and then I want you to go right into like your course of study and what you found.
Wonderful question. So the real impetus behind my pursuit of this particular research focus was my son. My wife and I adopted a boy about now going on to over 12 years ago, almost 13 years ago. And it was absolutely surprising, I will just say, because he was born with a heart defect. He was born premature, and he was born to, unfortunately, a birth mother who was addicted to methamphetamine. So he had a number of things going against him. And we were basically expecting that low cerebral blood flow because of his heart malformation, his the addiction to methamphetamine. He was born addicted to meth. And so that, of course, causes some changes in the brain and the addiction part of it that comes with that, of course. And we really didn't know what to expect, but we kind of were ahead of the game as far as that. And so, I have 3 boys. Even my 2 biological kids, they're very different in so many ways. And it's been quite a haul. And I mean, he's a joy. He's amazing, and he's blessed us more than we blessed him, I'm sure. But one of the things that was really, I think, inspiring to me was that we tried a lot of different treatments. We tried dietary changes. We tried cognitive behavior therapy, and we tried CBD. I mean, we tried all these different things, and of course, reducing screen, controlling the bedtime. It was just really not too much was really working. We finally ended up having to go into medication, and he's still uses to this day stimulant-based medication. And ultimately, one of the things that I was initially curious about was, does this have the same effect? Does exercise have the same effect as like stimulant-based medications? Because if I can get my kid off of the meds, I want to do that. Because there are other side effects that will come along with it. Well, then of course, as things started to change, I started to dig deeper into the research, as you can definitely relate. You just start digging deeper, and then more and more research comes out, and you're looking at this saying, well, as of right now, the medication seems to be pretty good, specifically stimulant based. So maybe rather than looking at trying to compete with medication as far as my research focus, maybe I will look at exercise as more of an augmentation to either no one using medication, so they're just not getting treated at all, or if they are on medication, do their symptoms improve with exercise being added as an additional treatment, complementary treatment.
Got you. So the work that you did, it was children that were on medication, and then did you see were there like control groups with medication, no physical activity, medication with physical activity?
Yeah, so it ran the gamut. Okay. But it's probably, if I was going to say there, and I wrote this in a lot of my sort of where are the gaps and the limitations in the research whenever I draw conclusions about this and things that can be improved upon in the body of evidence, was so many studies had so many different things they were comparing. It's really hard to then kind of rein it all in and then adopt a particular causation, right? You can definitely draw some correlations. And so there were definitely studies that compared those who were on stimulant-based medication and those who were not. Some kids who were diagnosed versus some who were not. Typically developing kids, so kids had no symptomology, nothing referencing ADHD. How did they respond compared to those with ADHD diagnoses? And then, of course, even then within the diagnosis sort of platform, there are so many different tools that can be used to diagnose ADHD. So if you use different tools as a measurement technique, then you look at a different study that uses other tools, or maybe that particular group of kids, they're not as ADHD severe, if you will, compared to these others, simply because they use different instruments to evaluate intensity or severity of ADHD. That makes it really hard. But here's what I will say, that even when we compare those studies that had stimulant-based treatments and then with stimulant-based plus exercise, the plus exercise performed better. And then we saw some that would be stimulant-based, no treatment other than exercise. And the stimulant-based ones, they improved in many aspects, from emotional regulation to attention and focus, reducing hyperactivity, impulsivity, what's called task switching, or being able to switch tasks, attention switching. They improved. Of course, the medication improved, but those in the exercise group also improved. Now, the degree or the magnitude to which they improved wasn't as large, but one of the takeaways for me was that I reviewed a lot of the data that showed that a lot of, especially lower income families, maybe don't pursue treatment for whatever reason. And so if they don't pursue treatment from a medication standpoint, and even those who have, let's say, like a medical condition, like we were concerned about my son's heart condition and the use of medication, especially a stimulant, maybe they don't qualify for a medication, and maybe that there has to be an alternative treatment path, like cognitive behavior therapy or exercise. And so it was really encouraging to see, in a lot of the evidence shows that there are improvements, in fact, with exercise alone as the addition of treatment.
Oh, that's fantastic. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here. This is the NASM-CPT Podcast. My name is Rick Richey, and we have Dr. Jeff Kreil with us today, who has recently earned that title, doctor. So again, congratulations on that and your recent graduation from the program at Penn West. And he's been doing work on youth with ADHD, and bless you for adopting. I think that that's so amazing and noble, and it's a big undertaking, and so shout out to you for that. And ended up being, I guess, the impetus that drove you into the direction for your research, which I think is very cool. When it comes to the research that you've been looking at, I think one of the concerns, and you mentioned it, is that there are sometimes different criteria for evaluations for ADHD. And I'm curious, are they self-evaluation, or is this evaluation that a licensed therapist kind of asks questions about and then uses maybe a Likert scale 1 to 5 and fills in on their behalf, or is it self-administered?
That is another aspect of the breadth of the different tools that were used. And I really tried to focus my analyses on studies that used a variety of tools. If you lean too hard on like self-evaluation, first of all, especially with considering the population, right, with young kids, a self-evaluation may not be all that great. And to be honest with you, if you lean too hard, even with adults, a self-evaluation, they might change their response according to how they think they should have responded to treatment.
That's true.
Or how they feel they should behave if we're talking about behavioral evaluation. So a lot of the studies that I used had really a good mix of surveys, self-reflection, parental reports. There is what's called the Connors behavior survey. And so that checklist uses a teacher one as well as a parental one. So you can see what they're like at home under those circumstances versus in the academic setting in those circumstances. And then there are definitely some that had self-evaluations, but then also actual quantitative tools. We're talking about the Tower of London test, these different task switching tests, and there are a little focus and reaction time tests. And so I got an opportunity to see a mix of different types of evaluation tools, and that to me was really what I was looking for, because I wanted to make sure we didn't put all the eggs in one basket and then come up with this conclusion that it seems to work, but if that person doesn't respond the right way, it's going to change it. In addition to that, there were also not as many, but definitely there were some qualitative studies as well, where there was more of like interviewing, like one-on-one interviewing, a small group kind of feedback back and forth about almost think of it like a parent-teacher conference. Think of it like that, looking at like, are you noticing just general things that you can't necessarily put a number to, like a Likert scale, like you said, but we can definitely notice behavioral changes, things like that. So there was a lot of quantitative stuff, and then used from a lot of different measurement tools, which I thought was pretty valuable to kind of come up with a more focused answer as to whether this is going to provide a benefit.
Got you. On any of the research that you came across, was there anything where it was like thrown off, like skewed to some large degree, either like this exercise really helped these kids in this study, or it didn't actually do much for these? And when you get that, do you go, you're really throwing off my data, I'm gonna have to not include this in my study?
Well, as you know, when you're vetting the evidence, doing what's called a broad scan, you're reviewing, looking for like the levels of evidence, trying to get it as gold standard as you can get, right? You're talking a meta-analysis, systematic review of nothing but controlled, randomized controlled trials. Like that is the what you're trying to find. And so I definitely found some studies. I was like, you didn't even test them before. Like you just tested them after. What? It improved. Yes. I had some that they didn't use an established, validated testing protocol. They just went, we tried them on this and we saw changes. I'm like, yeah, but I don't know that test even works for what you're trying to accomplish, right? Is it reliable? Is it valid? So I I had to read through those, of course, in order to kind of filter through and find the stuff that was more worthwhile. But as far as the outcomes not being all that great, one of the things that was quite interesting, and of course you have different influences, right? You're talking about the frequency, how many days per week. This is perfect for program design for the NASM podcast. Frequency, there was from 1 time a week to 5 times a week across different studies. You're talking about different intensities. And that was another difficult thing too, because it was difficult to say moderate intensity, because moderate was defined as a different percent of maximum heart rate in one study as it was compared to another. So I had to look at the percentages. And in some cases, they would say moderate intensity, but they never actually evaluated heart rate. So there was really, sometimes they would use like perceived exertion. But again, that could be skewed because not everybody's good at kind of identifying how hard they're working necessarily. So that was really difficult. Intensity was probably the hardest one for me to be able to align sort of those research stars, if you will, to ensure that I was actually comparing apples to apples. Then, of course, duration. There were some particular studies that were 10 minutes long and 10-minute sessions, and others that were 60-minute sessions. And then I think the most exciting one and most compelling to me was the type. And so I had some that were swimming, which sounds good, except how many kids do we know in this country who don't even know how to swim? So if they don't know how to swim, they couldn't then introduce a particular treatment that's going to be of any benefit because they're going to drown, right? So even though swimming, aerobic exercise, specifically the mode of swimming, seemed to have a lot of benefit for a number of different outcomes related to attention and focus. And then you had some that were riding a bike, walking on treadmill. That's all fine. Those seem to have some good outcomes. Again, it seemed to be that chronic programming, so programming over several weeks, seemed to have much more of a sustained effect than just one single bout, like an acute session. We're just going to try it this one time and see what happens. And by the way, the chronic ones even showed that there was some delayed benefit as well. So there was actually a sustained benefit on attention for a couple of hours following, and even a couple of days in some cases. But the interesting thing was then I started getting into I started focusing more on type. And as I'm realizing, well, the frequency, intensities, and time, those are kind of consistent, but the type may be a unique attribute that may offer a significant difference. And I started finding stuff related to HIIT programming, high intensity interval training. I started finding things related to like exercise gaming. So it was like almost like a Dance Revolution kind of thing where you're running around doing things, or like a Wii Fit, perhaps. I'm not specifically talking about this is what they use, but trying to give it more of like the average person could understand what they're talking about. And so in light of that, I started seeing more and more studies when I focused more on type, more related to martial arts, more related to coordination-based training, more complexity. So not just we're going to do sit-ups and push-ups, but now we're talking about practicing Taekwondo skills. We're talking about now working on things that require multiple task attention. So bouncing a ball and then moving laterally. I'm just giving an example. Or like, for example, we talk about in our speed, agility, and quickness chapters in NASM courses, we're talking about cone drills, speed ladder work. And when we start adding complexity, that then starts to train the ability of the prefrontal cortex to be better at planning and organizing. I can attend better. And then, obviously, the certain structures of the brain, like the basal ganglia, that are in charge of processing information, that processing sort of improvement can actually start improving other aspects of the brain too. The RAS, or the reticular activating system, which actually, once it gets better at filtering information, like this is necessary, this isn't as necessary, let's go and coordinate around this. That actually can improve attention and impulsivity and hyperactivity, which are the primary symptoms of those with ADHD. So I found that the type was actually much more critical in my research than the frequency and the time. I'd say type and intensity were probably the two biggest factors.
So regarding type, did you come across any of the types where, because you mentioned cardio, you mentioned high intensity, and then skill-based things like Taekwondo and sporting style events. But you mentioned that you were interested in strength and conditioning, not just conditioning. So, what were the effects like when it came to resistance training? Did they differentiate? This is a resistance training protocol. This is a cardio, and just kind of identify what worked or did not work with those interventions.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point, because I believe there were very few studies that even identified true, what we would consider like resistance training. And I'm wondering if, although it was never actually mentioned, here's why we didn't choose it. I think when it comes to something like resistance training, you are always going to be at the mercy of the researcher's ability to deliver an appropriate resistance training program, as far as cueing posture and form, range of motion, the proper plane of motion, whatever. It's going to be a safety thing. And then also you're talking about kids. You're talking about the studies I reviewed were from 5 years old up to 17, 18 years old. And so, you're not going to probably have a novice, a neophyte 6-year-old kid, doing barbell squats or anything like that. But one of the things that they did do was, it was mainly focused on body weight resistance training. And so it would be like lunges and jumping jacks, more calisthenic based stuff. But what I actually do, if I can kind of apply this into how I do my strength conditioning with my youth, is I actually take time to do sort of the traditional, here's how you do this stuff. And then we start adding in complexity. Now I'll add like a metronome, for example, where they have to follow the count of the metronome while they're doing a lift, and they have to speed up or slow down according to what they're listening to. I will have them attend to something on the wall. For example, we have a fitness clock. They have to attend to the wall while they're engaging in an activity, and they have to then vocalize what they're seeing on the clock while doing proper form at the right tempo, all that kind of stuff. So I try to, because like you said, the strength part of what I do, I try to add the strength part. And then as they earn it, of course, they have to earn the progressions. As they earn it, I start adding in complexity, layers of complexity. And that complexity could also be, they have to do it at the same pace as a partner. And the partner could then change the pace. I'm like mirroring drills, like we've done in SAQ type formats. And then I will have them add layers of complexity related to, they have to do something in one direction and then have to do it in a different direction. And then when they get good at that, I then tell them they have to do different directions and can never duplicate a direction sequentially. So if they're going to do something in the sagittal plane, then they can go frontal plane, but they can't go sagittal again. They have to do something else and then rotate back. So we'll do like a squat matrix or a lunge matrix or a push-up matrix, or even having them do a defensive pattern where they have to patter forward, patter backwards, sideways, and they can never repeat. And those kinds of things, I'm trying to take the cognitive element of conditioning and blend it into the stuff that they may already know. And I'm always curious too, because just like with adults and having trained adults, people come in with their own biases, their own ideas of what they should be doing. So oftentimes I will start off with a little more of the traditional stuff and then start throwing in a little bit of the flair, if you will, to allow them. They trust me. Perhaps they trust the process. They trust what it is I know. And now I can be a little bit more liberal in how I insert those things into the programming to continue to maintain the buy-in from those kids.
Oh, very good. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the NASM-CPT Podcast. I'm the host, Rick Richey, and I've got guest Dr. Jeff Kreil with us today talking about youth and ADHD. And I am just curious now, as we start to wrap this up, I know you said it's all over the board, things that you're looking at. What were the outcomes? I mean, what do you really see? Do you think that there are strong benefits that of any particular type of exercise intervention that is beneficial for youth that have ADHD?
Yeah, so I would say, as I kind of alluded to before, I would say that I definitely would, for practitioners out there, I would lean more towards the intensity and I'd lean more towards the type. So the intensity, try to get around where they are relatively breathless, if you will, and try to focus more on getting them to be able to sustain that intermittently. And then I would then say, make sure that they are doing things that are much more complex in nature. So hey, if you want to throw in a bicep curl, that's cool, but then throw in a bicep curl with a lunge matrix, or then go ahead and have them do it maybe at a specific cadence where you change the cadence throughout, or maybe they have to mirror and they have to match someone else. The cognitive element, and I'm really thankful to my advisory panel, because after they started seeing the first year of my research and the outcomes, they saw that there were some interesting elements that were almost missing related to the cognitive side. And they encouraged me to dig deeper into the cognitive side. And I'm so glad I did, because that really exposed a lot more of the different types, which for me, from a pragmatic standpoint, I mean, right now, I teach at a college, and we have basically anything we'd ever want in the weight room, right? We have an amazing facility. And then now I'm at a high school where the facility is not nearly as robust. I have to be more creative. I can't lean on the machines or the tubing or medicine balls. I have to then insert my experience with making things more complex. And of course, I can do that without equipment. I can do that just by planning ahead, right? My preparation. So if I was to offer any sort of guide, it would be, make sure that you are intentional about the intensity of the activity. And of course, it has to be relative to the individual, right? So a person who's deconditioned, their 80% is going to look different than a person who's conditioned, right? It may be jumping jacks, but the one who's deconditioned won't be doing nearly as many to hit that 80%. And then also the complexity of it. So you can add in different types of jumping jacks, and they can do that. I actually do this funny thing, because I think sometimes high school athletes take themselves a little bit too seriously, especially at the higher levels. So just to kind of break the ice, I'll have them do jumping jacks around the room. I call them nomadic jumping jacks. And they are just moving around like crazy as they're doing jumping jacks. And it focuses them on what they're doing, but also getting the intensity up as well.
Gotcha. I cannot stop thinking about Dr. John Ratey's book, Spark. And I know you're familiar with his book, Spark. And it really is about exercise and the brain, and exercise's effects on the brain. And he goes through a lot of things, whether it's anxiety, depression, ADHD, kind of hits on a lot of things. And for me, that book changed everything when it came to exercise, because exercise was always good for the body. Exercise is good for the heart. Exercise is good. We kind of compartmentalize the body. And what he really did is say exercise is good for the brain too. And here are all the benefits that exercise has on the brain and on your outcomes and how you interact in the world. And that I was at that point, I was like, I feel like there's anything going on in your body, and no matter what it is, fitness is going to benefit you in some way. Physical fitness is going to benefit. And we see this so many times over and over again, becoming more and more researched too as we go on. And ADHD just seems to be one of those things that are researched, probably not as much as some of the other ones, but ADHD is also most prevalent in youth, and therefore ADHD in youth is probably more researched than any other thing.
Yeah, there is a lot of evidence in adults, but I think you made a really great point leading into the beginning of this, that it seems that these neurodivergent situations tend to resolve themselves, or at least mitigate some of those symptoms that maybe with kids are much more magnified. Social situations in school where they're forced to be in certain settings, emotional control. They're also going through a very difficult time as children, learning how to be responsible citizens, how to interact with others. So it's really magnified in that population. And interestingly, there is a lot of research in youth, but I still don't think there's enough, because I think that we're still too spread out and really haven't kind of gathered it all together and been a little more, we need to be more consistent in how we measure this stuff. And, it's always going to be difficult though, because kids may not be nearly as compliant as adult subjects could be as well.
Yeah, I agree. Jeff, I want to say thank you so much for taking time out of your day to be here with us on the NASM-CPT podcast. For people who are interested in maybe looking at some of the work that you've done or asking you questions about this, want to reach out to you, what are some of the best ways that they can do that?
Sure. So they can email me at my work email. It is jkreil@vcccd.edu. And of course, I do have a Wix website that has some of my portfolio information, some of the studies that I've reviewed, and of course, everything is cited. I have references for everything, and of course, as time goes on, there's going to be more information that comes out. So if they have any questions, please have them just email me. Go ahead and reach out, and I'm happy to share the link to my portfolio, and you can review some of the work that I did in all the different aspects, including the community events and teaching opportunities I took part in.
Fantastic. Jeff, thank you so much for being here. I greatly appreciate it. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here. Like, subscribe, share with your fitness friends and family. And if you don't mind, also leave a review, please, on whatever platform you're listening to. It really does help our show get exposure, not just when there are likes and subscribes, but also those reviews. So that's very helpful and greatly appreciated. So please do that. And if you've got questions for me, feel free to reach out. You can hit me up on Instagram at dr.rickrichey or email me rick.richey@nasm.org. Y'all keep inspiring people to fitness. Thanks for listening. This has been the NASM-CPT Podcast.